All right, we are live. Hi, everyone. I'm very excited to interview Luis Fraguada, third party developer support at McNeil. If you are in AC tech space, you will already know that amazing developer team at McNeil. They have been pushing the boundary with a lot of their developments. And when I got to know that Luis has an architecture background, I thought like I should get Luis on the show because it's very inspiring to see architecture transition into professional developer role. So thanks a lot, Louis, for your time for this interview.
Thank you for having me. It's really nice to be here.
Yeah. So, Luis, can you share us about your background, where you grew up, and out of all things you could do in life, why you chose architecture?
Wow. Big question. I mean, my background. I'm Puerto Rican. I was born in Puerto Rico, and my family moved to the States. So I grew up a little bit in Puerto Rico, and then the rest of my high school and such was in the States. I was interested in doing architecture. I can't necessarily say why. I was, like video games, and I don't know, somehow video game designer didn't seem like something. It seemed architecture could be a way to maybe get there. Um, you have to build stuff digitally, so that was interesting, and so I went to University of Colorado Boulder, did an environmental design degree. But there, um, the first couple of years there wasn't much, CAD teaching, but I quickly was able to do, all the required courses, and I had a lot of time for electives. And there was a lot of professors that were coming from Columbia that had studied or taught at Columbia, and they were messing around with Maya, 3D Studio, and so I took electives, with them and learned some of that, and realized that there's limitations to the software, and when you find those limitations, there's programming you can do. You can extend the functionality of that software. So I was always the person that, let's say, had the software. You probably know some guy like that in your undergrad. No, had the software, knew how to move stuff from one software to the other. Like how to all the tricks to go from 3D Studio to Maya or to Form Z or whatever. And always, had a script or two, learning that stuff. So yeah, it was when I started to learn Maya and learned a little bit of Mel scripting that I really was like, whoa, okay. And you can, you don't have to like just be happy with whatever that you get in the box of the software. You can start to go way beyond that. Um, and that led me to, already starting to look at, different places I wanted to go to do my master's. Eventually, I didn't think that I was gonna do it, but was lucky enough to get some funding to go to the Architectural Association Design Research Lab. Studied there with Theos Paropoulos, and well, of course, there's a lot of scripting and programming there, and that's when I first started to. That's when I first got exposed to Rhino. I think it was Rhino 3 or Rhino 4 at that time, and Rhino had Rhino script, which is a VB script based language, and I did a lot of stuff there in Maya and Mel scripting, and then Rhino and Rhino scripting. And towards the end of my master's is when something called Explicit History came out. So all of that was just a lot of exciting tools to play with. But yeah, it was clear to me that you know I wasn't into drafting. I wasn't into of course, sketching and all that stuff is important, and I cherish that. But I was really drawn to how you can extend the functionality and eventually make your own programs, and that language there also opened me up to collaborating and thinking about other domains, not just in architecture. So I've had the chance to collaborate with people in other industries. But I mean, I guess the connection then back to Rhino and McNeil, I from there I was using Rhino and Rhino script and eventually Grasshopper all the time. I had a practice for a while. The practice still exists, but I was the research director for Built by Associative Data with my partner Ali Basbous back then, doing projects mostly in Beirut and Lebanon, which so I actually was able to build something, an actual building with that people use. So I got that experience, and that was like, okay, that's enough. that's that's enough. But between that, my master's and all of that, and I was doing already courses for McNeil Europe because I had moved from London to Barcelona to do a very short course with an architect named Marta Malea Alemany, who does amazing stuff. If you get a chance, please look up her work. She was teaching at IAC back then. She said, I was showing. She came to one of the juries at the DRL, and I showed her some of the stuff and look at these scripts, and she's like, I don't care about those scripts. Show me how you build that. How do you make that? What's the logic to fabricate that? And that obviously clicked something in my head that I was okay. I was trying to laser cut some stuff, but that's not real. That wasn't really like defining the tectonics of what I was trying to do through scripting. And that's okay. I should go and go to Barcelona and learn from Marta, which I did in a short course, and I've been in Barcelona ever since. Learned that, I wanted to do some workshops, Rhino script workshops, and so I thought I'd contact McNeil, and that's when I learned that their Europe office is in Barcelona. So that was completely happenstance, and started a relationship with them. Would do like a advanced training in Rhino script and eventually Grasshopper every couple of months with them. And long story short, eventually proposed a couple of projects and was hired, and have been there now, I think 6 or 7 years. Yeah.
That's awesome. And I could hear a bit of echo. I don't know it.
I can't hear it, but if maybe it helps if I put some headphones on.
Thank you.
I don't know
Thank
if
you.
it. Yes, there we go. Does that help at all?
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Yeah, I think that solves the problem. Yeah, so first of all, like amazing journey. And I'm curious to know like was programming natural to you or you had to struggle a bit when you were learning and going through this journey?
Oh, I mean, the struggle is real, of course. But I don't know, I was always drawn to computers. I mean, I played a lot of video games. I had an older brother who, was playing Atari and Nintendo, and when I was, I wanted to also do that stuff. And I remember in my elementary school days, learning Logo with the turtle and moving the turtle, and that's a combination of drafting and programming. So let's say like a text-based interface wasn't something, wasn't, let's say, scary necessarily, but then it's when you get to like, you know you got to let your brain go through that. And I do remember like during my master's writing my first recursive um, function that it was for like growing some kind of structures through some points in space or something. And for whatever reason, I didn't finish it that day or something, or something kept failing, and I got the worst sleep of my life that night, and I still remember. And just because I couldn't, I sleep very well. I mean, I'm not someone who has trouble sleeping, and I just remember that night that I didn't quite finish it, or some parts were working, parts weren't, but it wasn't working exactly how I wanted. And that was, that was, a tough night, and that's just one of the many struggles, of course, because there's those kinds of struggles, but those don't last so long. If you're really invested into it, those are the struggles that kind of are painful to your body actually, but you overcome them very quickly if you're really motivated to keep going. The struggles beyond that is then like, yeah, just become what do you want to do, and so if you're not short on ideas, then that's not going to be too much of a struggle.
Got it. And so before joining, you were like doing workshops with McNeil and like doing those teaching sessions. And now for your role, like how does a day in your life look like? What are the programming software, the language, or things you do?
I mean, it's pretty varied and it's pretty flexible, so that's I enjoy that quite a bit. But I mean, I proposed one of the reasons I got hired is I proposed a kind of like I was really into 3JS. It's a JavaScript WebGL framework, which it's got a great it's let's say it's got a lot of people that are working on it, and it has a lot of functionality, and can't recommend it enough. But so I was interested in getting Rhino model. Actually, during my undergrad, when I finished my undergrad, I did a internship in the business school at the University of Colorado, and they wanted to do, like walkthroughs and, like have 3D models and excuse me, an Internet Explorer back then. And so that was kind of the first exposure that I had of like 3D models on the web and how to get them. And it was pretty nasty, the pipeline. I mean, it was like you had a 3D studio model, you had to like bake stuff in there, you had a plugin for a middleware called renderware, which is like some of the first I guess Grand Theft Auto games were based on that. But it was like proprietary, and there was this whole pipeline to get stuff in, but then it worked, and I can still run some of that stuff today. So I was always curious, I thought, getting models on the web and having 3D experiences through that interface was really important. So that's one of the projects that I proposed, and that was this Iris project, Iris that we call it. That's always been kind of a work in progress, and I actually just updated it this last week because I guess it expired because I put a time bomb on it, and then that's another struggle. Is then you start making stuff, and you don't know if people use it. You don't know if people like get onto it, and so like it expired, and then I had like 30 emails saying, "Hey, it's expired. Can we get another version?" So yeah, so I do JavaScript, I do C Sharp, because those are things that I really enjoy, and it seems getting let's say 3D and Rhino out of the desktop and into the browser, something that I really like. So I do a lot of that. I get to also work with Rhino3DM, which is our library of how you access Rhino files outside of Rhino. So Rhino3DM JS, and all the other versions. And so I've been working a little bit on the DevOps there. So Github Actions to build all the Python versions, even though I'm not, I claim that I don't do Python professionally, but I have to, at least make the Python versions build. And so a little bit of DevOps, which I also enjoy. But recently I started as taken over as product manager for Food for Rhino. So if you've ever used Rhino and you want to find
Yeah, yeah.
something like to extend it, we have Food for Rhino, and it's a platform that has been running for several years now. And I'm just joining the team that we have to see about getting it to like version 3. It's actually, we're on Food for Rhino 2 right now, but we don't say that anywhere. But I think that's a natural extension of me helping other architects and design firms build stuff. It's where our developer community it's one of the branches of our developer community, because that's where people get stuff out to the public. So I think it's a natural extension of what I typically do, is to kind of also see like how can we make that experience better. Lately and before we've started an integration with our package manager. So like what you have there in Rhino, you can also have in Food for Rhino and vice versa. So we're trying to do some work to make that experience a little bit better, and get like package management a little bit more, let's say, get Rhino users to be more used to package management. Maybe if you're a developer and are used to like npm or NuGet or these kinds of things, you understand how useful they are. But from a Rhino user experience, you have, okay, you go to Food for Rhino, you have to download it, you install it, all these steps to kind of do it. And I think Food for Rhino has helped to at least concentrate where extensions to Rhino live. But if we can make that experience even smoother, and Will Pearson and others have been working on the package manager to like, make that, just a click of a button, here's the stuff, and get it installed. Um, so yeah, my day is really varied. It could be from working on the Food for Rhino platform. It could be on, doing something for Rhino3D MJS, and like extending that, giving it new functionality, or doing some JavaScript, something or other. So, or helping people. So it's pretty varied, and I really enjoy that.
Oh my God, that's amazing. You have a big spectrum.
Yeah,
I
because
was
I've never been uh, good at being like an expert of one thing. I can never focus on just one thing so much. So I think the fact that I'm able to have some flexibility to do that at McNeil, that's pretty. I'm pretty fortunate in that respect.
I see. Can you elaborate on DevOps and your Rhino 3DM and 3JS integration? Like, uh,
Yeah,
are you doing wrapping or like?
yeah. So I actually wrote the 3DM loader for 3JS. So now if you go to right now, you can just go 3js.org/editor, open a Rhino file in there. And so that's something I'm pretty proud of because like I said, I worked in 3JS. I made this Iris, which was an exporter. So I had to like export and not do all the stuff that Rhino 3DM was doing. Because at that, I think when I started it, we didn't have the Rhino 3DM.js yet. So anyways, but the DevOps part of it and the JavaScript, I mean, the fact that we have a Rhino3DM.js at all is pretty interesting. And this is something that several people, including Steve Baer, um, and I know maybe Dan Belcher had something to do with it, maybe Brian Gillespie, but essentially we have OpenNerbs. OpenNerbs is a 20-year-old plus that's been, it's not 20-year-old, it's been developed for 20 years. It's still, when I say that, it sounds like it's crusty, but it's still, it's been open source for that amount of time. But we're not a company that's so comfortable with open source. Not that we just don't know how to do it. We put something out there like OpenNerbs 20 years ago. Nobody knows too much about it. Only people who want to integrate with Rhino use it. Like if like you're a software vendor, you want your users to be able to open up 3DM files, you used OpenNerbs, which is in C++. So what Steve and others were able to do was to take that C++ code and with Mscriptum make the WebAssembly bindings for it and create a JavaScript version for it. And so that's what eventually I've recently been using to make that 3DM loader for 3JS. And eventually the project that I spoke to you about before, Iris, will use this knowledge and this work to make an exporter, update the exporter to just use Rhino3DM.js. But we also build Rhino3DM.py. We build the Rhino3DM.net version. So it's all in that repository. And what we were doing before, and this is before I started messing with the project too much, is we used other continuous integration platforms like AppVeyor, or in this case, it was Team Builder, which the McNeil team had experience. And that's just anytime you make a change to the code, you push some code, it automatically builds that just to make sure that it's building and you didn't break anything in that level. And so, but what I wanted to learn GitHub Actions, which is something that is relatively new in the GitHub world. And so I kind of got into automating the build process of all of those versions. And I don't know how many Python versions we have to build and release to make like all of the wheels, the Python wheels. But so it all builds. I'm still having some issues with the iOS and Android versions of it. And yes, Rhino Inside is very good. And so yeah, we still have some issues there that I have to kind of figure out how to build those versions. But yeah, it's pretty cool that with GitHub Actions now you can build all of that stuff. And so for specifically the Python version and the JavaScript version, the .NET version as well, we have a layer somewhere in there between the C++ and the target language. And so there's some bindings that we have to write to wrap the OpenNerb C++ code to eventually WebAssembly or the Python module. Yeah, so I've actually been doing some wrapping of that as well. It takes me a little bit longer than others. I'm more in the .NET JavaScript world, but I enjoy doing that also.
That's awesome. And like, I didn't know how big the problem is about like model compatibility and conversion. Like when you want your 3D or Rhino, like a Revit model into 3JS, like there is IFCGS way, and there are like different approaches.
Mm.
So that's a complex problem, and like it's. Can you elaborate on like what were the challenges in developing this wrapper, and also you mentioned about Git Actions. So can you give like specific example how how you are implementing it in this workflow?
Yeah, I mean translating our geometry to like 3JS or to anything else. In the end, it's as long as the other the other API has a point, then we just have to build the points and do everything like that. With 3JS specifically, I think Steve Baer wrote a like a to 3JS or from 3JS for our mesh class. So that makes it really easy to get that stuff. The tougher stuff is like NURBS, because a lot of this, well, 3JS doesn't. It has some NURBS stuff, but it's not really, it's more about meshes and things like this. So it's, how do you, even curves, how do you represent a very beautifully smooth curve into something that you can actually draw with WebGL. So we have to discretize, the whole thing. And so and by the way, all of this stuff is open sourced. Everything that I've spoken about, except for the Rhino core itself, OpenNerbs, Rhino3DM, Rhino3DM.js, the 3DM loader, all of that stuff. That's all of our open source initiatives. So you can see how we do all of that stuff. So it's not magic. Even somebody mentioned Rhino Inside and going, there are, we're actually making the Rhino Inside Revit implementation, and there's all the converter code of how Rhino stuff goes to Revit and Revit stuff goes to Rhino. It's all there. So if either we're doing it all right and you see and you can use that, or we're not doing it all right and hopefully you can catch something but contribute to that, because anybody can use that. Anyone can use the code that I've written and others have written to convert from Rhino to 3JS stuff. It's in the 3DM loader. Anyone can use how we're going back and forth between Rhino and Revit. It's in the Rhino Inside project. So that's all there for you to see, and hopefully that means that we're not reinventing the wheel so much. But with regards to GitHub Actions, well, in the particular case of Rhino3DM, we have both a continuous integration action. So anytime there's a push to the repository, it builds a few versions. So it builds like a .NET version, it builds the JavaScript version, and it builds some version of the Python version, but not all of the versions that we eventually release. And so that's just to check that there's no errors. And these are basic errors in the code. So we're not so far into having like unit testing yet, but we're hopefully going to get there soon for this project. But it's just if, I don't know, if I forgot a semicolon somewhere, or something else, even so that kind of stuff that maybe you don't see, and even some a bit more complex stuff. But there's a couple of Python scripts that actually build all of that, and these were written, I think, mostly by Dan Ringden Bell, actually. And so there's a bootstrap script, there's a setup script, and a build script, and those all eventually call CMake. I mean, it's a all, again, most all open source tooling. It gets a bit complex, but it's so essentially the GitHub Actions. You just go. It's essentially just a list of steps. So you say, here's the name of this job. It needs to run, because I'm going to build the JavaScript version. It needs to run, and then that case can be Ubuntu. But if I'm doing the .NET version, that one can actually run on, maybe I want a Windows flavor, so I run that on a Windows agent, a Mac OS version, and a Mac OS agent, etc. So you tell it which machine it needs to run, and then you say, step 1, check out the source code. Step 2, I don't know, pull in the dependencies. Step 3, run the setup script to make sure that the machine and everything else is there. Step 4, set it up, and step 5, build it. And then, so if you get through all that, eventually you get an artifact, which is the build itself. Eventually what you would use in JavaScript, the library I would use in some 3JS code, and then you'd get that. And so if nothing goes wrong, you have that as the output. So that happens anytime somebody pushes changes to the code. And then when we want to release and make a new version, we have another one that's just a release version that does a lot of the same stuff, but on more versions. And so you just, in GitHub, that one you can run if you're a administrator of the repository, and you just press a button and say, run it on this branch, and yeah, and eventually we get a ton of versions of Rhino3DM.
That's awesome. So that happens when during push, not during merge time. Like, so you are doing for every commits people are proposing. So you have a check whether like the code is running well in all the versions. Got it.
Yeah, yeah. If it passes the CI test, then it's probably more than likely will pass the all the release versions.
I see. I have seen like amazing development in Rhino Compute. So is it in the roadmap that McNeil will be releasing a full web version.
And hold on, I have to react to this. Internally, we're using SAT. Okay, you're gonna have to maybe check that with Kike and Esan, because the internal implementation of the conversion is something that they've been writing. If they've had to use SAT, I think that's more from a Revit um, Revit perspective. But yeah, I was only involved with the Rhino Inside project very early on. Did like Rhino Inside Unity and Rhino Inside Unreal Engine. Um, but yeah, there's only so many projects you can work on. So sorry, to get back to what you were saying.
Yeah, like I think like Michael had another question. If,
Have you, I don't know, have you seen Rhino Inside Revit, Michael?
yeah,
I mean, that's Rhino Inside Revit. Yeah, um, it is a Revit problem. Okay, yeah, it's not my area of expertise. I actually just uninstalled Revit or tried to uninstall Revit recently. I guess I had deleted the MSI, so I wasn't able to do it cleanly. But eventually, I got it off my laptop.
yeah, like so. What I was asking was, so I've seen people using Rhino Compute and like
Ah, yes,
in offices, like they develop their own like web version for releasing like for doing grasshopper analysis on web and stuff like that.
yeah.
Is McNeil planning to have like a full web version in
Mm,
the roadmap?
Look, I think some people give McNeil more credit than, to be, let's say, more strategic credit than maybe they should. Like I think with regards to like functionality, I think McNeil is a very conservative company. Like we're not going to just go and do some stuff just out of the blue. We listen to our users, and the stuff that we develop is typically to help users get their jobs done. So this Rhino Compute thing, it was more like people are doing this. People are putting Rhino on a server and they're writing a plugin to have it stay on and listen to requests. People are doing this. Should we see if we can make it any easier for them to do this? And so this was the kind of the start of the Rhino Compute project. And Rhino Compute is actually just Rhino inside, but it's Rhino inside a web service. And so that Rhino inside technology allowed us to eventually create Rhino Compute. But I think it's going to be like this for a while. It's going to be like we provide this demonstrator, which I think Rhino Compute now is a little bit more than that, but at least that's how we've eventually gotten it. That's how we're comfortable developing it. The version that you see, again, it's all open source, and you can see how that's going. We that's mostly been developed by Steve Baer and Will Pearson and a host of others. Now we have Andy Payne has joined the McNeil team, so that's really exciting, and it's a developer and part of the community for a long time, and developer of Firefly. And so he's actually, some of the first stuff he's been doing is looking at Rhino Compute on Azure and getting it running properly there. But whether you're going to see Rhino full 3D CAD, on the web, I can't talk to that so much yet. I mean, it's not something that we strategically have in mind, nor something that I don't know. I don't know if it would make sense. I think there's people doing CAD on the cloud, and they're doing it really well. And it's not something that we pretend to compete with yet. I think we just wanted to make that experience, extend the Rhino experience out further, and kind of provide a new way of making, and giving access to Rhino, and the fact that you can do remote solving with grasshopper definitions is really interesting. And it's also been nice to get the 3DM loader in there so that when you get a response back from Rhino Compute, you can visualize it with Three.js. So, but yeah, right now we're just, I mean, even how do you bill for this? It's not just about, okay, the technology's cool, let's do this, but like, how do we charge for this? This is not a business model that we know. McNeil knows how to sell licenses of software. That's what we know. So, but this is more like okay, do you pay for a Rhino license and put it on the cloud, or so that even knowing how to bill people for this in a way that they're comfortable with and we're comfortable with and they're used to, because they've used other web services. Even this we're learning and kind of getting used to. So we have to learn every bit. And I think with everything we do, I mean, I think you'll see that it'll be done in a McNeil sort of way. I guess is the best way to put it. It might be slow. It might be it might take some time to get there, but I think whatever, if enough people are, let's say, if that's going to solve enough people's problem that it makes sense to us, maybe that's how you have to kind of think about it from our perspective.
I see. It makes a lot of sense. And like especially the business around open source and like front loading all the developer cost is challenging like for all the new developments. So I'm curious to know the journey from customer feedback to feature development. So how do you guys filter out what feature or what priority you want to develop, and what's the brainstorming session look like?
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, again, there's like where you have to think McNeil is maybe 100 people, and a subset of that actually are talking to customers, and users each day. So we use various forms of getting that feedback, and capturing that feedback. I don't think any of the forms is perfect yet, and I think you could ask lots of people at McNeil, and they would probably agree with that. But what we try to do is we at least try to make an issue. We use UTrack, which is kind of like GitHub issues, but it just it allows us much more flexibility with how we organize ourselves there. So we at least try to make an issue if it's something that enough people, enough tech support people start hearing about it, that's going to get more votes and more weight. But it's I wouldn't that it's not really something we do a lot of voting on. Eventually, what happens is if enough people yell, if enough people scream about something, then we're going to notice it, and it's going to spark a discussion, and we're going to try to do something about it. But in the last, since Rhino 6, 7, and now 8, I think something that has started to work, at least once those things become a little bit more concrete, or the let's say the requests or the feature or the wish becomes a little bit more understood, then what we do is we create a new work document, and it's just a template we have on Google Docs, that we copy, and we has a bunch of questions and a bunch of fields for us to fill out some kind of description, of what the issue is. And this worked really well for the Rhino 7 development cycle. And then whatever didn't make it there, we'd put it into, eventually we'd look at it now for the Rhino 8 development cycle. And this is something that we've been doing the last few weeks, just kind of looking at that process again and seeing how that worked in Rhino 7. And now as we're ramping up Rhino 8 development, looking at that again. And, it's just something that it's very informal, but we have discourse. So we see discourse, how you say things there. But we don't have, we have a lot of different channels, but it's really trying to talk to people. And before, flying was so restricted, one of the parts of my job was going out and talking to people. I'd go and do trips to other cities in Europe where I could, meet with other people, do user days and things like this. And that's when you get a lot of feedback, and that's how Rhino's built, is from that. Then the next thing is, okay, the architects want this, the jewelers want that, because you have to think, Rhino is tries to be as domain as agnostic as possible, and that's tough. That gets really tough, especially when we have such a big market in AEC. People start asking for all the stuff that's in VisualArc. They want it, directly in Rhino. They want IFC export, and so then we have internal battles about, should IFC really be part of Rhino? And then somebody says, well, yeah, we've had this export format for naval architects for years. Why wouldn't we have IFC? So yeah, I guess that's just a long-winded way of saying we have no formal process beyond the fact that that's how Rhino's always been built, from listening to people, and we try to somehow, if it's loud enough, we try to write that down and then if other people notice it, then we have a discussion, and eventually it gets to become a new work doc, and hopefully that gets developed enough to get some developers on it and get something going.
Yeah, and I could only imagine like the wide spectrum of users you are addressing, and each category has its own demand. So it's challenging to have like that cohesive user interface. And are there any times where you developed a feature and you got a surprising user feedback about a use case which you haven't thought while developing, but it's like, oh, we didn't think about it, but people are using this in this particular manner?
Uh, Something called explicit history in Grasshopper. I mean, I was, I had not joined yet when Grasshopper came out, but I was using explicit history. But I mean, look at that. I mean, could you imagine that, architects would use it to build buildings, or that, jewelers would make jewelry out of it? Okay, that's what Rhino did. So we would hope that people did that. But, we've seen people connecting it, to processing or to other softwares to do artistic installations with it, to do whatever. So, that's something that was definitely that, that's kind of a tough example, because it's like a platform in of itself. But there's a lot of other things. I think a lot of the work that, for example, Daniel Piker does with Kangaroo, and just how people have used it for, the kind of stuff you'd expect, like maybe some engineering stuff, but also for just other.
Hmm. I'm not sure. Oh, okay.
Hello, are we back?
Hello. Yeah, yeah.
Cut out there for a second.
Yeah, you
I
were
was
talking about
Yeah, I
Daniel
was saying.
Picker and Kangaroo. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so yeah, I guess I can't think of an example right now of like a very, small incremental change that has like sparked like a really weird use case. But I think you can look at any of the features that have ever been developed in in Rhino, and something is surprising. Like there's a lot of folks on our team like Kyle Hutchins that come from like a toy manufacturing background, so like some of the things that they do with molds, for me, like mold making is, for me, is really, it's so detailed. I've made CNC molds for like big vacuum form stuff, but like, and so some of the tools that they are seeing how they work, for me, it looks kind of like a strange use case, no? But for them, that's probably exactly what the tool was developed for. So I guess it's also in the perspective of the person looking at it. Somebody that's a jeweler would look at something that we do and think that that's kind of a hack, or like a strange use case.
That's awesome. And you taught at IAC for a while, and
Yeah.
I'm curious to know your perspective. Like, what are the things on the technology or programming side you advise uh, students or professionals to learn that would be helpful in the work they're doing?
Yeah, I taught there for more than a decade, and I'm currently taking I guess, a pause from teaching in that regard. But yeah, I mean, there I was teaching programming and interaction and, um, Grasshopper, and how that all connects to like fabrication. And I mean, I guess the important thing is connect to it somehow. I mean, I don't think everyone needs to become, the best programmer in the world, or the best CNC operator, or the best robot handler, or whatever you want to, like, I guess that's also, from my perspective, as somebody that likes to touch a lot of different domains. But I mean, just recognize that it's how people are communicating. It's how data is passing from one team to another, all of these things. And you can get down to that granular level. You can affect things at that level. It's so if you want to, it's there for you to do. If you don't want to get at that level, you have to also recognize that that's something that's important, and it's the way that people are working. So the more you know about it, the better you are gonna the better you'll be prepared to communicate with those people and have those people on your team and better manage those kinds of resources.
Got it. And someone who, let's say, is really interested in this space but can't go for masters, or in the profession they want to do like self learning, like are there any courses or languages or libraries you recommend?
Yeah, I mean that's the great thing. There's all of this stuff you can learn on your own. I've had very probably the number of hours I've taken a programming course is less than I can count on my fingers, maybe on a hand, and so that limits me in a lot of ways, because I'm not coming from computer science, and I know those limitations, but at the same time that's it's really about what you want to do. So if you want to write applications that help people build better buildings, there's going to be specific subset of stuff that you want to learn. How do you want to get that logic to people? Do you want to get it through a web interface? Do you want them to have to download and install a software? There's so many avenues to go, and there's also so many tools that are even no code tools that you don't even need to code. You just need to know some logic. So the great thing about today is that all of that stuff you can have for free. I'm not saying that paying for a course, you shouldn't pay for courses. I mean, of course, um, if you do that, you're going to get much more focused learning. You're going to network with people. You're going to meet people that are giving those courses, and that's going to help you. So you need to connect to people. You can't just be sitting there in your house on your computer just tuned in. You need to connect to people. I mean, I think you do a really good job of connecting with people. Grow. I always see you around having these live
Thank you.
streams or doing these kinds of meetings, and I think you do a great job of connecting. And I think that's the most important thing is you want to learn something, connect with the people that are on the forefront of doing that, because we can only do so much on our own. A lot of the
Yeah.
stuff you can learn on your own. The technical stuff, JavaScript tutorials, there's so many out there. Look at 3JS. That's a great library if you're into JavaScript, if you're into 3D on the web and you want to see that stuff. 3JS is an amazing library, and you can get going really quick. And then if you want to import stuff from Rhino or other softwares, you have all the importers, and you can just go so far with 3JS as a kind of like and there's so many courses for it and so many examples. So, and then the .NET world is also like just full of knowledge and information. The Python world is the same. So, it's all out there.
Yeah, that's a great piece of advice. And one thing which I found very helpful is going to the community forums where people are asking similar doubts, or find people who are in the same space, and also attending conference like AC Tech where you can attend the workshop and
Yeah.
it's like a crash course way of learning things and getting the job done. So
Yeah, yeah.
uh,
I mean, that's great, and that's also good advice to go to those things. I mean, the community. You might when you start learning something, you might feel like, oh man, I'm just alone on this, but you're not. You're not that special to be the only one with that problem. Other people have
yeah,
encountered that problem before. So I think the hardest part is knowing the vocabulary to use for that particular community or software or language, whatever it is. That's kind of the how to ask the question in the language of that community is probably the biggest struggle to start out with. Yeah.
perfect. We have one question from Michael. Are there any plans to link PyTorch into deep neural world? Geometry is becoming a big topic in ML world.
Uh, no, there are no plans. I mean, it's possible. No, anybody that knows Python can do that today. So, and I think we also have Rhino inside C Python, so you can run C Python with Rhino, and I know a lot of people are doing stuff with TensorFlow and with the Rhino inside C Python workflow. So that's yeah. That's and then, a lot of the offices that I talk to are really interested in machine learning and all of that stuff. But I think the one of the biggest problems is is data, is having consistently clean data. And while architects have just gigabytes and gigabytes and terabytes of archived data, it's probably not very consistent, and it's a real it's a real task to go through all that and put it into some, I think, usable format. So I think that's also a challenge. But yeah, today I think connecting to PyTorch, and I think you could talk to Ehsan, who's one of the developers of Rhino inside Revit, also the developer of PyRevit. We're lucky enough to have him on our team. He'll probably know much more about that kind of stuff, since again I only use Python in fun OpenCV projects and things like that.
Yeah, I was in a hackathon where we made a like Hobs server and then did ML inference from that server and integrated that data into Rhino. That's an workflow around if you want to do machine learning inside Grasshopper or Rhino.
That's really
We
cool.
have
Yeah.
a question from Ollie. So many architects design in Rhino and document in Revit. Rhino Inside was a massive game changer in this area. But instead of just being inside Revit, why not leapfrog it with a Rhino Beam platform?
Yeah, I mean that's a good question, but again, we're really modest and humble, and I think Revit does a lot of things really well. That what you just mentioned there, the documentation, and so much more than that. I think Rhino inside Revit was kind of also one of the unexpected things that came out of that, is that a lot of users that have invested a lot of time in learning Grasshopper are in these design teams where maybe Grasshopper and Rhino are used in a conceptual stage, where they're developing the project, and at some point, and we heard this many times, at some point that all gets handed off and it has to either be rebuilt again and done in Revit, etc. And we heard this so many times, and with Rhino inside Revit, those people were like, again, thanking us. They thanked us for Grasshopper. Now they're thanking us again, because now their Grasshopper skills can go so much deeper into the project cycle. They can go into DD. They can go into and automate all those construction documents. They can tell Revit what to do through the Grasshopper interface. So many people, when that started coming out, and the people started using it in their teams, they're so grateful to be able to then take all of that and push it further. I mean, in terms of BIM in the Rhino world, we have Visual Arc, which we hear also a lot of great things. This is developed by a team that's with us in the same office in Barcelona, the Asuni team. Actually, Kike is one of the developers of is one of the developers of Rhino inside Revit. He's also one of the developers of Visual Arc. If you're looking for more BIM within Rhino, I would suggest to look at Visual Arc for some of that functionality. What have you put
Yeah,
here? Oh,
I got your collection and creations from Foundation.
oh, this is Hicketnook. It's not Foundation.
Oh,
Very
oh,
different.
sorry.
Please, very different, because Foundation is Ethereum, and I don't work with Ethereum. This is
My
Hicketnook,
bad.
which is a Tezos proof of stake
Tezos, yeah, yeah.
blockchain. It's a very important distinction, huh?
Sustainability and yeah, thanks a lot for clarifying. For some reason, like the background and theme reminded me of Foundation, but I definitely thanks for correcting. So, uh, one topic I wanted to discuss is about your explorations in NFT world, and what do you think about how architects have opportunities in this space?
Yeah, I mean, the reason I got started with this, I think, like many people who are in creative industries, we're also taught to be to appreciate things that look nice, and aesthetics and things that work well. So I had a folder on hard drives just full of stuff that I had done that I thought was interesting. I had done art, as before when I was in college. We used to have kind of art shows in different spaces around in Boulder, and so art has always been an important part of my own practice, but it's not something that I ever shared that much, you know. But some of the stuff that you're seeing here is stuff that I've been doing for, I don't know, since like for years, decades almost. And it's just, this is, I never knew or, you know, had any place to kind of put it out there, and this just became kind of a way to put it out there. Now, and it's been a lot of fun, and that's what it's been. It's been fun. I don't pretend. I mean, I'm a very casual artist. I don't pretend that this is, and I have too much fun programming and working with people in Rhino. So, but I also did it because, yeah, I'm curious to see what kind of dynamics this could enable for you know, the architecture industry. And I think if you want to get a good example of this, there's a couple of people doing interesting things, and in around the topics that we're kind of interested in. So yeah, maybe mention like Galo Canizares, I believe his name is. He has a project that I think is called NFT House that was minted, I think, around in March or April. But this is, so he's an architect and an educator, and he took a project. The plans, he minted the plans as I believe PDFs. I think he minted I don't know if it was like one of the 3D models, and like a walkthrough animation as 3 separate tokens. He priced them at his billing hours price.
Um,
And I thought it was an interesting kind of, you know, the fact that he could experiment and do this experiment and put it out there to see if anyone would be interested. Even, you know, I think for a lot of people, it's a way to, a lot of artists have found a new way to practice through this, and there's a lot of artists that actually can now live from this practice. There's a lot of people that are also just interested in experimenting with it, and I think for Gallo, maybe it's that, you know, he just wanted to see like what would be how would it react. I think I brought it up, and I retweeted when he first put it out there, and was trying to kind of engage with some of the people that I connect with on Twitter, and I was a little bit disappointed maybe in the responses, because I think this was, you know, maybe in the beginning of the year, March or so, April, when a lot of stuff was coming out about Ethereum's climate impact and yeah, Bitcoin's climate impact, which are proof of work blockchains. And so if we were working on Tezos, which is a proof of stake blockchain, you know, people just kind of group them all together, and when really fundamentally they're very different in how the mechanics of the blockchain work. So I mean, get educated about it, understand those differences, like anything that we've been talking about. You know, it's just like, just learn
yeah.
about it. Don't just like take it for face value and don't critique it without, you know, going a little bit deeper. And I think that's what some people are doing. There's another artist, researcher, Alexandra, and I can never remember their last name. Is Crowers, but I don't know how to put it into terms. But I believe the stuff that they're doing with that Alexandra's doing with 3D and exploring how an art practice with 3D models can sort of can live in this on the blockchain and be developed that way is I think something that has inspired me a lot. Another researcher, artist, I believe his name is Alex Grasser. He's doing some really interesting things because these NFTs that you see here, these many of them are images, but like this little tree down below, if you look down, there's like a tree, or this yeah. So this is actually a 3JS, and you can go around it, and you can, yeah, you can view it there, even in this one here. Yeah. So you can rotate around the model, I believe. Yeah, can you? Yeah. Okay. So it's just a tree with some 3JS stuff. But so you can actually connect it. There's a very limited number of APIs you can connect to, but when Hicketnook actually was going, you could connect to other NFTs. So Alex has this kind of sort of real-time architecture thing between a few NFTs. So like depending on how many people are looking at it, they can build something together. And I think he just released something. There's another platform that a lot of folks are releasing on called FX Hash, and this is all just generative uh, generative art, and you use a pseudo random um function to generate different variations of a theme. Another friend of mine, a colleague of mine, Jacek Makushevitz, um, has released a couple of things on there. One called Unbuilt, which is just like just generated like cathedral plans. And was super popular because they're just really nice to look at. They're beautiful, and it's a such a and it's done so nicely and so cleanly, and so that was really popular. So I think it's just a lot of architects are just naturally drawn to creating. We're at the edge of art. No, some architecture can be described as art. There's art in a lot of what we do, and there's a lot of craft. At least what architects do. I was never a licensed architect, so I shouldn't say we, but let's say you who are licensed architects. There's a lot of art and craft and and even the technical capabilities. I think there's a lot of art in that. So I think for many it's a natural extension, but I think if not, it should at least be something that interests you, because there's a lot of dynamics that are enabled. I think there's also a lot of things to be cautious of, because it's also tied to this whole sort of Web3 notion, which, if Web2 was kind of, I don't know, user generated content, like platforms gave you the ability to excuse me, to generate content. Web3 is still very early, but it's it's hard to it's hard to describe where it's going to take us. But now you have this kind of economic model, where you have like your wallet always tied to like of your actions. So I think that's interesting, and it's also something that we need to be kind of cautious about. But there's a lot of stuff that's being in a lot of groups already to work. You have ArchiDAO, a lot of other initiatives that people have approached us to with, and I think there are a lot of interesting.
I see. So can I foresee a Grasshopper plugin where you you directly mint from Grasshopper to this platform?
Let's build it. You're not the first one to ask. Same platform. We can connect right because you have to. All these things are kind of sandbox to make a platform separate where you'd mint something from a Grasshopper definition. So you're definitely not the first one to. And if I have enough time, I maybe a project. But it's totally just need to compute back end off to the races.
Yeah, definitely. I know like Theo Dunas made a workflow of blockchain for BIM and Grasshopper script, which connects to IPFS and calls the smart contract. So yeah, it's definitely doable. And uh, I was wondering, like, so when I saw the project called artblocks.io, which does on-chain generative
Mm-hmm.
art and integrates P5JS during like code while minting on the chain, I was thinking it would be quite interesting if there are like parametric configurators or like building configurators where on-chain generative metaverse assets could be in that.
Yeah, I mean, I think what ArtBlocks does is they have the P5JS code that's stored on chain. Let's say the results and all of that stuff is now FX hash is similar, but it doesn't yet store the code on, because it's a little bit more open. You can do P5JS, you could do just JavaScript. So it's a little bit more open. Yeah, I mean, it was. I mean, depending on how big the Grasshopper definition is, that's the thing, is like putting stuff on chain is pretty costly. So things
Yeah.
get expensive fast if you want to put more than just a little bit of metadata. So that's why everything is on IPFS and things like that. But yeah, that would be quite interesting.
Yeah, I have been also looking into like Oracle and off-chain external API call using smart contract. So if there's a heavy code for like the script, we could make like if Grasshopper API calls and like that results are then rendered on chain or something.
Yeah, I mean, I think you don't want to depend too much on an external service for
Yeah.
the actual token. No, just maybe the minting process, and then whatever. I mean, I understand a little bit what you're saying. I mean, you want something beyond just like a resulting form. You know, you want something live, and I see, I understand what you're saying there. But yeah, you'd have something calling compute every time you'd need to change that, or some other kind of parametric logic that could be updated, like I don't know, hypar or something else like that. Yeah, that could be quite interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
So
question there is like, how do you not make it so every time you do something you have to like sync your wallet and do something like that. You have to eventually also give some autonomy to the system and be comfortable with it, eventually charging some. But that's why Tezos is nice, because it's a really low cost barrier, no, to getting into it. Gas or storage fees for storing that stuff is relatively low. So, and there's the test nets. That's I've been actually working with a few groups doing testnet smart contracts, and that's been a lot of fun just to play with that. You go to the faucet and suddenly you're super rich with fake Tezos, and you can.
yep.
But yeah, then you can start to play around and do some fun stuff with different contracts. So that's something that has come out of the Hicketnunk community with a couple of people. Javier Garcia Carpo, I believe his name is, has been testing out some contracts that possibly could be used for the next version of Hicketnunk, wherever that community decides to go, and that's been a lot of fun to play around with.
Yeah. And I have heard like good things about Zoro platform, but I haven't gone deeper into it. And I highly recommend all the viewers and listeners to check out Luis's collaboration about a recent research paper he released on using parametric and like I think it's clothing and textile. If
Yeah,
I'm
yeah. I mean, this is interesting because this is one of the things that the community really wanted from Hicketnunk. It was collaborative contracts, and that is that more than one person can be let's say the author of the token in a way. And this is something that during when Hicketnunk was live. Now Hicketnunk has like the original one has dissolved, and there's a lot of mirrors, and the community is trying to understand what to do with the future of the platform. But that's what's great about the way that the way that the site was kind of set up, is that in a few hours take the code and kind of have a mirror going again. That was really decentralization somehow worked in that respect. The collaborative contract is something that was now enabled in the mirrors, wasn't enabled in the original sites. And so my partner Elizabeth and I have collaborated on many projects. She is let's say a practitioner in textiles and tailoring, and her background is in technical theater and opera. And so we've worked on wearable tech stuff. We've worked on things that deal with generating textile patterns and things like this. And we wrote a paper together where we documented a project that we did on this digital shirt, where you would buy this 3D garment. We'd send you the patterns, and then you could essentially either make it yourself or talk with somebody who knows how to make it. It was kind of to spark a conversation, or have you spark a conversation with somebody about getting clothes made. And so we wrote that paper. We presented it at a conference not so long ago, and then we decided that to mint the paper under this collaborative contract. So essentially, anytime somebody buy, and it's half a Tezos, which is like €1.50 now, or maybe less. It depends on the day. And so I think half of them have already been collected, which is really funny. But I think it's if you imagine publishing like this, or if you imagine architecture like this, that you can split the authorship and the ownership between several people, and then you collect. What does it mean to collect something that several people have done? That I think that has implications for, let's say, academic and professional publishing. I think it has implications for music. I think it has implications for art, of course. And so we wanted to try the collaborative contract for that, and it was really interesting. And a lot of people, I think, understood that it could have a really important impacts. If you've ever published academically or to an academic conference, you know that it's a bit of a racket. I mean, it's, in many cases you're paying hundreds of euros to just publish. In many cases, if you want the rights to then distribute that openly, you have to like pay additionally. So we've been lucky to be able to fund our own research with our company called Datable. Um, and so we wanted to kind of change that paradigm and just kind of do an experiment, try it out, learn about it, see what it means. So part of the royalties go to Elizabeth, part of the royalties go to myself, and part of the royalties go to GenCloth, which is kind of the entity that we have for these kinds of projects.
Yeah, that was super interesting. And the moment I saw it, I like so proud. Like people are doing this collaborative smart contract, like great development.
It's there, so people can go use it and use it for other stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So my next question is like, is there any idea or development you wish you could do if you had unlimited time and resources?
Oh man. Um, I mean, a lot of the stuff that Elizabeth has been working on is something that we wish we had more time to develop, and we're getting at. She's got some residencies and things that are helping to push that along. But it's about sustainability and fashion and trying to like get people more used to making their own clothes or being responsible for understanding what that means to be the owner of not just your clothes but the whole way that they're made. So I think there's a lot of really interesting things to develop there. I mean, I used to have something called Robots in Gastronomy, where we created a 3D food printing machine, which is, I think, still, is a pretty cool project. And there we developed a lot of interfaces for chefs. And so that was so fun, because you learn a whole different way of thinking, how chefs think. So, continuing to develop that and getting more into like, I don't know, the fluid dynamics of how something, squirts from a pressurized valve, so there's, funny things there. I don't know if, that's having unlimited time and resources is kind of a tough question to answer because it's due to the limitations that you actually do the things that you do. And without those limitations, you would be pretty I would be pretty I don't know, maybe lost into try to pin something down. I might have a bunch of empty folders on my laptop, but it's the limitations that eventually get you there.
I see. That sounds quite interesting, like that idea. I will wrap up the interview with a rapid fire round. So you'll have like 5 to 10 seconds to answer the question, and you got to make it brief. So let's do this. My
Okay.
first question is, which city is in your travel bucket list?
London. Yeah, love London. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Is there
but I've already, I mean that I get bucket lists is before Tokyo. It's Tokyo.
okay? Is there any technical or non-technical book which made a big impact in your life?
Yes. Slaughterhouse 5 by Kurt Vonnegut.
I see.
It's quick, so that, yeah.
I see. What's your
Hitchhiker's
favorite?
Guide to the Galaxy. Yeah, pretty geeky
That's a
books.
good one. Yeah, yeah. What's your favorite movie?
Spaceballs.
I haven't watched. I'll check it out.
Oh, come
Is,
on.
um, what are your hobbies?
um, Learning, doing art. Yeah, I'd say art is probably more of a hobby than something more serious. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you a dog person or a cat person?
Um, was a cat person, but haven't been a cat person a long time. It's been a while since I've had a cat.
Is there anything you wish you could have done differently?
Um, mm, mm, no. Yes, I mean, of course, that's like, yeah, but no, no, not really. No, no.
Yeah. What is your piece of advice for people who are interested in doing a tech startup in this field and who are pretty new in this space?
Uh, don't give up your IP for VC funding. Find other ways to fund it. Yeah.
I see. And lastly, is there anything which we didn't cover in this interview and you'd like to share?
Um, I mean, if you're a Rhino user, if you're starting or if you've been a Rhino user for a while, um, and you haven't come by discourse or asked a question there or been in touch with us somehow personally, please reach out. Again, we talked about it in the beginning, but that's how Rhino gets built. Is from your feedback. So please let us know if something's bugging you, if you can't get your work done, or if you have an idea of something you want to do. Get in touch, please. We like hearing about all that stuff, and that's what eventually gets Rhino made. So
That's awesome. I just recalled one question I forgot to ask. So it's difficult if you are new in the NFT space to build a community to get your NFT art like bought by the people. And I've seen like you also like recently got recognition in Art Basel, and you have developed a really good community around your NFT artwork. So can you give us some things how you developed this and like what was the secret sauce?
the the secret sauce is having a lot of work that has been in just getting old and hard drives, but believing it and thinking that it is something that inspires you and inspired you at the time to make it. But I mean, the Art Basel thing was happenstance. I mean, I literally wrote, filled out a Google form in time, and that's it. And I haven't even seen how it was there. I think Tezos was really well represented there, so I think that was good. But again, there, if for me, it's been Discord and on Twitter, but there's lots of Discords. There's the Hicketnook Discord. There's the Hicketnook Community Discord. There's all sorts of other there's some nice ones that I've been able to get to recently, like well, there's also the FX. All the platforms have a Discord, so FX Hash, object.com, they all have a Discord. But then there's a group of artists that puts out a magazine. I don't know if it's weekly or bi-weekly, called I think it's called The Tickle of Warhol's Fruit, I believe. Uh, there's a Discord for that, and I found a lot of they have talks every Tuesday and Thursday on Twitter Spaces, and I found it from let's say the NFT art world, kind of a breath of fresh air in that people are talking about art. It's kind of insightful. It makes you think about somebody's process. There's at least from when I've been listening to, very little ego involved, which I think is important, because a lot of the space is really fueled by ego and vanity. A lot of it isn't. So it's just finding those things, and I'm still finding my way around as well. But there's more of you out there than I mean, when there's a lot of colleagues that I've known for many years that are also playing with NFT art, and you're going to find them as well. So if you just want to do it and try, Hicketnook on Tezos is a really low barrier to entry. I have a presentation flying around that I can also link to that gets you started. You don't need a big investment, just a couple of maybe 2-3 euros. There's a Tezos fountain where if you if you write to them on the Hicketnook community Discord, you get enough money, enough Tezos to start minting a few pieces. So just come to Tezos, come to the Hicketnook community. There's other POS blockchains that I'm sure have their own Discords and communities. So just I can definitely recommend the one that I use, the ones that I use. But yeah, that's a really low barrier to entry. So get a couple of friends and give it a try.
That's great. Uh, Thanks a lot, Luis, for your time for this interview. I learned a lot, and it's very inspiring to know your journey and the stuff you are doing. Like, it's great. You, I feel proud when I see such developments.
Thank you. I feel proud. I'm honored to have been here, given well how what I see you doing and what I see the people you have on as well. So thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Have a nice rest of your day, Luis.
All
See
right,
you.
likewise. Take care.